Chris, it's the end of the week again, and here we are with another big week of news.
Yes, it was a great week. Unfortunately, I was under the weather. My voice is still recovering, but wow, what a week of news.
Yeah, yeah. There's so many things to talk about, but again, this week we had a lot of news around chip fabrication, a lot of money flowing into chip creation. I've got a lot of questions about chips. I think probably a lot of people who are watching the AI space are wondering why so much money is going into this particular area of fabrication. We do know that these chips are specific for the kind of processing needed for AI. Let's talk a little bit about that before we get into the news of the rest of the week, which is why do we need so many chips? Who's making these chips? Who's paying for them? And what's the energy strain that we're putting on both the economy and the environment?
Sure. I think it's a great question to think through and for people to have conversations around. So, one interesting positioning that NVIDIA has focused on is the fact that their chips aren't specifically for AI. NVIDIA is focused on accelerated computing. And within that context, you have things like virtual reality and augmented reality, self driving cars, the metaverse, even AI, as we're seeing a lot of that being used for today. What we do know is that AI leaders like Sam Altman have been very vocal in saying that we don't have enough AI chips to power the sorts of training and inference that they need today and also in the future. And so
Right.
you're seeing where at the country level, different countries are starting to think about their sovereign AI strategy and having ownership of the hardware that will power their intelligence for their future. And so you're seeing countries in the Middle East looking to just really hone in on this sort of technology. But you're also seeing a lot in terms of geopolitics, where the US is keeping a very tight grip on this technology. They don't want China and other rivals to get these advanced chips. And so you're seeing a lot of trade embargoes on who can access the chips and who the companies can sell for. And so this week, what you saw were a lot of different efforts, both domestically and internationally, for companies that are looking to either invest in new chip fabrication or new chip technologies. And what's important to appreciate is that there are two sides of the equation. There's the training side that happens in the big data centers, and then there's the inference side that happens every time you log on to like ChatGPT and you send a prompt. And so there are going to be different layers of chips and chip technology that will be needed. And unfortunately, the existing CPU technology that we were using for decades just really doesn't cut it. And so the workaround has been GPUs, graphic processing units, and traditionally those have been used in games. And it just so happens that it's really good for the parallelization that's needed for AI technology. This week you saw so many different stories of companies, and I would
Yeah.
want us to highlight some of those now.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So, probably the big one is in NVIDIA. So, why don't we start there?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. One, NVIDIA had a massive week. They had their earnings this week, and wow, talk about momentum. It's just not stopping for them. But two things stood out for me in their earnings call. One, the CEO said 40% of their revenue in data centers are now coming from inferencing versus training. And that's big for them because it means that not only are they leading on the training side, but they're also leading on the inference side. And the second thing is in 2019, gaming represented more than 50% of their AI data center usage, and now it's below 17%. And so
Amazing.
you're seeing the vast majority of their revenue is really being driven by accelerated compute.
And I think what's really important here is not that the pie is being redistributed, but the pie is actually getting much bigger, right? So that small percentage of gaming, that gaming hasn't reduced in size in terms of
Exactly.
market share. What we've just done is added a whole net new market to NVIDIA's opportunity here. Yeah, their TAM is massive right now. But that's not the only news, right? So we've got other competitors moving into the space. Like you said, there's some sovereign considerations. And for those of you thinking about, those typical kind of comparisons, like if you're going to go gold mining, there's the people that are in the mines doing the gold mining, but then there's also the people selling them the picks and shovels and the Levi jeans and all that kind of stuff. That's where this is coming in, right? So these are the companies making the stuff so the companies can make the stuff. It's the engine that builds the engine. So tell me who's coming into the market, because we've got a couple of new faces here.
I love that analogy. So you have Masayoshi's son, who is from SoftBank. And so they're the owners of ARM, which is another major chip manufacturer. They have been having discussions with some of the sovereign wealth funds in the Middle East about building a $100 billion AI chip venture. And the numbers that you start to hear now when it comes to startups is just ridiculous. Can you imagine like starting a project at $100 billion?
Yeah.
And so they're calling it Project Izanagi. And the idea is that they're going to be doing fabrication. And you saw conversations last year between Sun and OpenAI CEO Sam Altman, but it doesn't seem those panned out. And so they're looking to really innovate on their own. And I think you're going to start to see that happen a whole lot more, especially as the US tightens its grips on the advanced AI chips.
We've also seen Groq have announced a new chip. So speed is important, apparently.
Yeah. And for clarification, this is not Elon Musk's Groq with Twitter. This is a completely different startup.
This is Groq.
There's obviously going to be some sort of like naming rights showdown to happen. But a demo came out this week that showed just ridiculous inference speed. So they have a comparison side by side between GPT and Groq, and you hit enter and just within milliseconds it spits out the answer. And so you're going to start seeing just super fast inference, and that means you can have more conversational AI that's real time. It doesn't feel like it's delayed or it's thinking. You ask a question and immediately you'll get a response. So startups like Groq are exciting to watch. They have a new infrastructure called LPUs, language processing units, that is the magic behind what they're doing. So we'll be keeping a close eye on them.
Okay, cool. Where can we expect to see these chips actually in use?
So inference speeds you'll definitely start seeing on the front end. So if you have on-device AI, so as you think of AI that will start to be rolled out on your iPhone later this year or on your Android devices, you want those to be super fast. When you think of AI native devices like the Rabbit one, right now you're seeing it suffer from really long latency, and it just makes for a really poor user experience. And so these devices, these applications will now feel a lot faster, a lot snappier. And when you ask a question, you can expect to get a response in real time.
Yeah, I just got back from New York where we were hosting an event for product design and engineering leaders who are specifically building digital products. And I can immediately see how rendering prototypes, rendering code in using these new speeds would be really relevant, because essentially what you're doing is just pushing idea or concept through to the code, and you want to be able to render that as quickly as possible. That's a key component to efficiencies within these product teams.
I'll actually call out one specific application. When you think of video generation and what we saw with Soar last week, right now with diffusion models, there's this slight delay where you have to wait for it to generate the content. I can really see that time being cut down drastically with increases in inference speeds.
Yeah, maybe you can put one of those in my car as well. Okay, so the other chip news was that Microsoft and Intel are back in bed. This seems like an old relationship rekindled. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah, and this is the last big chip story that I wanted to highlight this week. I think it's important because you're starting to see, again, the geopolitical nature of the dynamics of the chip wars play out. And so the US government was involved in the deal, and the idea is to bring chip fabrication onto US soil. And Intel is now spinning up their Foundry business. And they had all the top AI leaders, Sam Altman, Microsoft CEO, at their opening event. And of course, they inked a deal to likely manufacture Microsoft's new AI chip. And so look forward to seeing more fabrication opportunities on US soil, in addition to the innovation that you're seeing with the chip startups.
Chris, can you tell us why the government was involved? Are they actually brokering the deal? Are they putting money in? Do they see this like, basically an investment in innovation, sovereignty? Why would they get involved?
A few years ago, I think they passed the CHIPS Act. And so the government is actively looking to bring manufacturing of advanced chips and technology back onto US soil. For the longest time, a lot of this was happening in Taiwan and in Southeast Asia. And now as AI technology gets more advanced and the capabilities understandably become a national security issue, the government is increasingly keeping a very close eye on which companies are advancing in the space and ensuring that they're keeping just their tab on the deals and the ins and outs.
Yeah, and I think one way to think about this is that essentially they're protecting the the virtual plumbing of the the flow of
Yeah.
data, the flow of information. Basically, if you think about this, you know, 100 years ago, we're building roads, we're building interstates, we're laying down cable, we're laying down telephone wires. It's the same thing. We need control over that as a country to be able to create some kind of stability. We want to make sure that it's protected. We want to make sure that it's there. If it becomes a utility, which a lot of these things become, like electricity, like water, we obviously have to maintain some kind of infrastructure for that. So if anybody's wondering why the government would be involved in this, put your libertarian ideas aside. This is really like basic infrastructure stuff. These are utility issues for the most part. The next thing we want to talk about this week is models. We've got a couple new models. Not as big a model week as we had, a couple of weeks ago. But let's maybe just remind everybody how to think about models, because these models are obviously pushing the manner in which we are processing forward, but they're also changing the way that we're going to be interfacing or interacting with these things. So can maybe just give a little, a 30-second primer on what this actually means from a technology point of view. What is a model? Why do we need it?
So think of your models in terms of the foundational technology that will power a lot of the applications that we'll be using with AI. And so you have the top players like OpenAI's GPT, you have Google's Gemini, and you have Anthropic's Claude. And those are the three big foundation models. You also have open source models like Llama and Mistral. And what we saw this week was a move by Google that was not only strategic, but it was very specific. They released a new family of open models called Gemma, and it's built with the same technology and research that powers Gemini, and it is impressive. It is aimed squarely at the open source community. It beats Llama, it beats Mistral in a lot of the benchmarks. And when you think of the size, when you think of what Google is bringing to the table now, it feels like the sleeping giant has finally awoken. Right? Since the beginning of the year, they have been consistent in putting out new models, but also now putting out open research behind the community to say, hey, you know what? We have our closed proprietary models, but we were the pioneers in the space, and we're also going to keep giving back to the community. And so I'm excited about Gemma. It is super fast based on the demos that I've seen and what I've tried online, and I think the community is going to respond very well to it.
Cool. We also saw we got a first look at Stable Diffusion 3. So what can we expect from this? Why is this a big deal?
Yeah, so I think competition is always great for the space, right? And so last week, OpenAI said, you know what, we're going to release Sora. It's our new video model. This week, Stability AI said, we're going to introduce Stable Diffusion 3. Now, even though Stable Diffusion 3 is technically an image generation model, it uses the same technology, which is diffusion transformers, that powers Sora. And so you can expect that this is going to power stable video in the future. And the quality that we're seeing with Stable Diffusion 3 is amazing. It can spell. It has really great context understanding of multi-subject prompts. And now you're going to be able to see that in video.
The reason why it's important, the spelling thing, is that if you've ever created an image, you'll notice that any text that comes up in your image is either badly spelt or just, essentially looks like gibberish. So this is a big step forward, recognizing language, understanding how to put these words together, and then integrating them into the images.
One teaser that the CEO of Stability AI shared on social media, he shared the future of control that you're going to be seeing with Stable Diffusion 3, where you can do really fine-tuned and fine-grained control of different parts of your image or of your video. And that's going to be the next thing. So once they have reached to the level where you have a certain degree of fidelity and quality with the output, now they're going to start working on control. And so many exciting things coming for the media generation space.
Stability AI sold Clipdrop to Jasper this week. One of the things that we're starting to see with this is that these companies are running experiments. These experiments are becoming small companies or feature-rich products that they can then spin off and essentially create a separate kind of revenue stream for themselves. But that's really what we're going to see a lot of, is that we're in that divergent phase of this technology. We're seeing a lot of companies create things that may or may not fit with their core model. And Jasper buying Clipdrop makes a perfect sense for them because it's really just focused on image manipulation for things like marketing. Jasper is really focused on that marketing user, the copywriter, the creator, the person who's putting the email together. And of course, this helps them set up for a relationship where they can compete against Canva, against Adobe, especially the Express product.
Exactly.
Cool. Let's talk about Google pausing their work on Gemini, about specifically about generating images. Why would they pause? What's going on there?
Yeah, this is a very interesting story. When you create a prompt in ChatGPT or you use Google Gemini, the prompt doesn't go directly to the model. It goes through an orchestration system where the AI changes the prompt to send it to the model. And so what Google was doing was to introduce diversity stipulations in a prompt in order to have more diverse outputs. That's a good thing. That's what you want your model to do. And so let's say you said, show me a picture of a doctor. It wouldn't just show images of white
A guy like
males.
me, a white guy, like your wife. Your wife would be a diverse option. Yeah.
Exactly, right? And so that's a great thing. You want that in your model. However, what happened is when people started to put historical characters or specific things like, let's say, the Pope or US senators within a certain time period, they were also introducing that sort of diversity insertion, and it ended up creating a very broken experience. And of course, it stirred the pot with a lot of racial issues. To play it safe, Google said, hey, you know what? Let's put a pause on this and let's work to get it right. And I want to highlight how other companies are solving this right now. So OpenAI does also modify your prompt, but they have seemed to have a more capable and a more sophisticated model that understands when you're asking for a historical reference, and they can modify the prompt accordingly. Adobe does something really interesting though. What Adobe does, they look at the region where the user is registered for their Firefly account, and they show them images that would be relevant to that region. And so that could be an interesting approach that Google looks to adopt, or at least to think about. But it just goes to show that AI is not about just technical people working on the tool. It needs to be a multidisciplinary approach to think through problems like this and how we can reflect humanity at its best.
Yeah. Well, the pendulum always swings, right? So we've got to find a balance there. Cool. Let's talk about our favorite topic, money. So the big news, of course, was what you've already mentioned. NVIDIA hit the ridiculous numbers. The market cap has gone through the roof. Let's cover that quickly, and then we can talk a little bit about the investment stories that are happening in the news.
Sure. So NVIDIA is now the third largest company in the US by market cap. So you have Microsoft, that's $3 trillion. You have Apple, and then you have NVIDIA. And it's showing no signs of slowing down. When you think of it, like every technology, every company of the future is likely going to be needing chips, and NVIDIA stands well positioned right now to benefit from that.
So this is not a money story, but specifically, but it does have something to do with this conversation that we had a couple of weeks ago, and that is when your AI model is learning, it's often referencing material that could be, copyrighted, under license with somebody else. Google have decided to step directly into this conversation by signing a deal with Reddit and saying, look, we want to license your content directly. So we're not going to be scraping it in some kind of nefarious way. We actually want to go directly to you. It makes sense. Reddit is going to make a ton of money. So are the New York Times. So is everybody else who's got great content. These companies that are requesting access or licensing to this technology, they've got the money. It seems like an appropriate channel for these companies to show up. Hey, next thing, somebody's going to come to Maginative and say, we like your content. So we like this idea. We love it whenever content creators or journalists or whatever finally get their dues. Last year we saw, writer strikes. We saw a lot of newspapers going out of business. In fact, I think there was like the most number of newspapers going out of business in a single year. But this actually gives me a little bit of hope. It makes me wonder, is journalism starting to get, or writing and creating, going to find its way back into the conversation with a deal like this?
Of course, this is going to give Google and Google's AI Gemini access to a real-time sentiment of what people are thinking. And Google has said over the years they have found that Reddit answers and content has been surfacing a lot more on Google search. So it'll be really interesting to see how this affects Gemini and other future Google products.
Okay. A Chinese AI startup called Moonshot, nice name, has decided to raise $1 billion on a $2.5 billion valuation. This company is less than a year old. Man, oh man, things are moving quickly. Why do they demand such a high valuation? This seems a little out of whack.
So Moonshot is really interesting. They were founded last March by a 31-year-old founder, and their claim to fame is really large context windows. A context window is basically the amount of information that you can give to an AI in a prompt. And so for them, they were able to fit 200,000 characters, Chinese characters, within a prompt. Now, to put that in context, ChatGPT can fit roughly 128,000 characters. Claude can fit roughly 200,000 characters. But last week, Google announced with Gemini 1.5 Pro that they can fit up to 1 million characters. And there are other startups that have been able to fit up to 5 million characters. So it's really interesting to see the valuation of Magic AI in the Chinese market versus Western counterparts.
Yeah, I think the urge here is to predict that these companies would be able to do what other companies are doing, and so maybe that's what the investment is in. It's not so much what they can do now, but what they can actually do in, say, a month or 6 months from now. Cool. Okay. Little shift here. We're going to talk a little bit about Adobe. We spoke about them last week, the week before that. They're obviously a big player in the generative AI space. One of the kind of the oldest products that has been around forever is Acrobat. And it's being given a new lease on life. I actually have to tell you a funny story. I met a guy from Microsoft yesterday, and he was wearing a Clippy pin on his coat. And he says, we're bringing Clippy back. Well, Adobe are going to bring back their version of Clippy, and they've just added an AI assistant to Acrobat. What can we expect from that?
So I do think it's really cool that you can talk to your documents now. And what Adobe has really done very well with their AI implementation is that they take tools and the services that people are already using and they introduce AI there versus asking them to go to ChatGPT and upload a document. Right in that Acrobat file, you can now talk to your document. And with Adobe Sign, it means that you now have access to a lot of those legal documents or financial documents or contracts where you're going to be able to ask questions naturally and get responses from the AI. I think it's a huge win. The big question is just pricing.
Okay, next story is Retell AI launches an API for conversational voice AI agents.
So this was easily one of the coolest demos that I saw this week.
Hello, thank you for calling Retell Dental Office. How can I help you today?
I would like to make an annual teeth check-in appointment.
Great. Have you been to our dental office before?
Yes, my name is Rose.
Thank you, Rose. What time would you prefer for your appointment? We have availability on weekdays from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m.
I would like to make an appointment 8 a.m. next Monday.
Got it, Rose.
Actually, sorry, can I switch to Tuesday 9 a.m.? Is that okay?
Of course, Rose. Tuesday at 9 a.m. works for us. Your appointment is now scheduled for that time. Thank you.
Thank you.
What Retell AI is doing, they're in essence doing what Stripe did for the fintech industry. So you go online, you enter your credit card details, and boom, you can make a payment. You're not thinking about all the complexities happening on the back end. Retell AI wants to do the same for voice AI agents. You have your state-of-the-art models like 11 Labs that produce really realistic synthetic voices, or you can clone your own, and you bring your language model and they will provide an AI that handles all of the orchestration that makes conversations realistic, meaning reducing latency, addressing interruptions. I want you to listen to this demo and tell me what you think. I think it's so exciting and amazing that we're starting to see technology like this come to fruition, and it's going to make developers' lives so much easier and deliver a much better experience for the end user.
That's interesting. My grandmother used to talk to herself, and when I interrupted her and said, who are you talking to? And she said, I'm talking to myself. And I said, why? And she said, well, I'm guaranteed of a good conversation. So now we can talk to these AI agents, and we're guaranteed of a good conversation. Another one of the large companies that's inserting AI into their existing workplace, of course, is Google. We talked a little bit about it last week. They've now gone ahead and actually included in Workspace. We've seen Gemini now available across the Workspace. Tell us a little bit about that.
So this is a quick update. Basically, last week when Google released Gemini, it was for the consumer product. This week, it's for their business offering. And think of this like Microsoft Copilot. You'll be able to access Gemini and address emails, your documents, and your files. It's a really great offering because it's going to give you the most capable Gemini Ultra offering.
Tell you, it's flippy. Last story of the day, OpenAI had a pretty quiet week, actually, given the last couple of months. They've added a couple more features. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
So while we're still waiting on OpenAI to allow paid GPTs, they have announced that you can now add ratings to GPTs in the store, and you can see richer profiles for builders. And this is great because as they're building around the ecosystem for a paid offering, it's going to give users more visibility in terms of how popular apps are, how many conversations they have been used in, and you can give feedback to the builders. And then for builders, they get that immediate feedback to know what's working and what's not working. So OpenAI is taking their time to build out that ecosystem, but I'm really looking forward to when they release paid GPTs.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like cleaning up the store, essentially just making sure that it actually feels and acts like a store is going to be a really important step towards making that a little bit more approachable and accessible for the folks like us, creators who want to put something in there. It's got all the features. It kind of, it feels a lot more legitimate than if it's just a directory, because that's really what it is right now. It's just a directory. Anything to round us off this week, Chris?
As always, I encourage you to hop on over to Maginative.com. There's so many stories that we didn't get a chance to cover in today's update. Drop a comment below if you enjoyed today's episodes, and hit the bell icon if you want to be notified whenever we drop a new video.
Yeah, and this is the timeshare part of the show. We remind you that we actually need to eat, and it would be great if you guys could subscribe to our paid subscription model. We do a premium version of this update, the newsletter that arrives in your inbox at the end of each week. And of course, tell your friends, tell your mom, tell your dad. Everybody's coming imaginative. It's amazing. It's great. It's the next big thing.
All right, Richard. Until next week. Take care.
Excellent. Thanks, mate. Ciao.